Hadrosaurs have long been depicted as the cannon fodder of the prehistoric milieu, and a backdrop of hapless victims for T-Rex and other predators. These dark-billed dinosaurs had seemingly unremarkable bodies, with their only saving grace being an array of crazy head crests. So Parasaurolophus and Corythosaurus might get some vague recognition, but hadrosaurs without even these, like Anatosaurus, are pretty much SOL. However, I'd argue that our understanding today of the hadrosaur bauplan is pretty incredible and worthy of appreciation. And to that, crests are just icing on the cake. To illustrate this, I'm happy to share with you the PNSO Audrey, the Lambeosaurus. Hadrosaurs are divided into two groups, the Lambeosaurines, which had hollow crests, to which Lambeosaurus here gave its name, and they include Corythosaurus and Parasaurolophus. Then there are the hadrosaurines, or saurolophines, without crests, such as Gryposaurus and Edmontosaurus. Now, Lambeosaurus was an estimated 9.5 meters, or about 31 feet, and at 25 centimeters, measured with string, that makes this 1:38 scale, happily close to my preferred 1:40. But there are estimates as large as 15 meters. I mean, that's 50 feet, which would make this 1:60 of scale. Now, hadrosaurs are exciting because we know a lot about how they looked from very well preserved fossil bones and fossilized mummies. So when you hold a model like this, you can be confident that you're holding something very close to reality. Now, this species is Lambeosaurus lambe. It had a hatchet-shaped crest, as you can see, and also this backward projection like the handle. Think of it like this guy, except with the hatchet buried at the back of the head. Now, what were these crests for? Now, given that the bottom contained hollow continuations of the nasal passages, perhaps a resonating chamber for sound production. Another obvious idea is sexual display or special recognition, a role in social behavior seemingly supported by having a relatively large brain. And it's painted appropriately for a great social life. It's black on top, and then a very bright eye-catching orange and red, and that goes down, and at the point where it connects to the predominantly green head, there's a transitionary zone where the two colors intermix. I really wouldn't have thought green and orange go well together, but they really do over here. Now, all this is covered with a very glossy coating that reminds me of lacquering and just looks really, really good. There's a dark green band around the eyes and at the top of the snout, which transitions into a light green that's really the general color theme of this dinosaur. At the tip here, there's another mix of orange. The face looks wet, and indeed the whole thing suggests perhaps it's just dipped its head into water for a drink. The eyes are really well painted too, with the eyeballs precisely centered. So you get no cross-eyed dino here. Lambeosaurines have narrower beaks than their more duck-billed saurolophine counterparts, so they were probably pickier eaters, and you can see that here. Very, very nice and slender snout. Now moving down, you can see how beautifully this is painted. The general theme is green, overlaid with a reticulated pattern of white. Now, green alone is generally boring, but the way the different shades of green interplay here is just really beautiful. I'm probably going to use the word beautiful, overuse this word a lot in this review. Now, if you look at the hips, down the tail, the back and the sides, it's just wonderful how there's a sort of translucency that's created simply because the applications of paint are so subtle. And that really makes this look like real skin and pigmentation. Now, overlaying all this with a highly pleasing reticulated pattern just really elevates it to a new level of cool. Now, what sells the life in this model for me is it looks like after these white patterns were applied, another layer of the basement color was added on top. So you see, for example, in the belly, some of the orange showing through. In the thigh, some of the green. And up here, some of the orange. And on the other side, you'll see pretty much the same thing. So again, there's a real subtlety to the way that these layers of paint have been applied to create an illusion of pigmentation that you'll see in a real animal. Now, comparing him to the box art, or I should say the release images, there really isn't any difference at all. In fact, the only obvious difference I would say is in the crest. The original work had a lot more subtlety in the horn, and it's not as glossy as what we have here, opting perhaps for more suggestions of keratinization you might see in a real animal. Ours maybe looks a little bit too stylized, but other than that, it's really a very beautiful model, very close to the release images. Now, the neural spines are very tall in hadrosaurs, with the tops often depicted with this crenulated appearance. Now, the orange flows from the crest, emphasizing these crenulations, and then blends pleasingly with the green. Some of this orange is also echoed over the belly and also in the throat region. Speaking of tall neural spines, look at the tail. It's held characteristically aloft without much flex. Now, the spine of hadrosaurs were reinforced by a trellis of ossified tendons, which cross the neural spines. Now, why give up spinal flexibility for this stiffness? Well, one possibility is the idea of postural hogging. Now, these ossified tendons act like stiffening trusses, preventing the vertebral column from buckling due to the huge size of the animal, something we tend to forget. These animals could get huge. Now, given that we have so many hadrosaur skin impressions, surely this would be the perfect canvas on which to go crazy with detail and texture. Well, fortunately, no. And I say fortunately because, yes, we do have incredible skin impressions, but remember the size of these. Now, given the small scale of this model, you simply shouldn't find any detail like that. And that's a mistake many models make. For the sake of aesthetics, the scales are often scaled wrongly, so to speak. So what they've done here is very clever. If you look throughout, you'll see that they have incorporated very tiny, very minute scale-like detail, and the wrinkles are very delicate, which again hints to the smallness of these scales, because we've frequently found that in areas where there's a lot of flex, the scales are actually a lot smaller. If you look down at the belly here, again, very subtle suggestions of scale. Maybe some, yes, there are some osteoderms here on the underside, which is a little bit unusual, to have them more ventrally rather than dorsally. Just wonderful detail. Says a lot without having to say too much. And really, one thing I would say is that you'll appreciate this as much by feeling as by looking, because it's very tactile. The limbs are so graceful and so lithe, almost stilt-like, which is especially surprising for the forelimbs, which have to support weight. And we know this because digits 2, 3, and 4 actually bore hooves for weight bearing. There's no thumb, and the 5th digit is the only prehensile digit sticking out here like a sore thumb. So they weren't much good for manipulating, just walking. And unlike earlier depictions of bipedality, these were facultative bipeds. They could walk on 2s, but usually on 4s. Now, can you appreciate the beauty of form and proportion of this body plan? It's gracile, it's lithe, and the narrow base of support suggesting perfect balance and such slender ankles. The whole package just looks beautiful. Now, can you see that? Or does all this sound like the rantings of an obsessive lunatic? In fact, when I consider these factors, the slenderness of the legs, the narrow stance, the choosy snout, the pattern, and even the orange, there is an extant animal this reminds me of. Now finally, on a very personal note, I'd like to share why there's something special about this color scheme on a hadrosaur for me. When I was a little boy, one of the books that made a huge impact on me was this one. I borrow it from the library every week just to pore over the pictures since I couldn't read any of it. On the cover, as you can see, is another hadrosaur in a green pattern, and within are more examples of this type of pattern, which I don't seem to see much of anymore. So there's a link back to my childhood, and this reminds me very much of it. What would have been perfect would be if this had been a Parasaurolophus, but hey, let's not be greedy here. Alright, so that's it for this very beautiful and elegant dinosaur brought to life by the incredible PNSO. I'll see you very soon.